Millionaire enters NICU. Nurse says, the poor twins in room 4 won't stop asking for you. The December wind cut through downtown Chicago like a blade, carrying with it the first hints of what meteorologists promised would be a brutal winter. Inside the towering glass offices of Sterling Financial Group, 42-year-old Marcus Sterling stood at his corner office window, watching the city below move in its predictable rhythm. The view from the 48th floor made everything look small, manageable, just the way he preferred it. Marcus adjusted his Italian silk tie and glanced at his Rolex. 3:30 p.m. He had exactly 30 minutes to make his appearance at Children's Memorial Hospital, pose for a few photos with the oversized check, and return to close the Henderson deal before market close. It was all perfectly calculated, as everything in his life had been for the past 15 years. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked softly before entering. "Mr. Sterling, your car is ready. The hospital representatives are expecting you at 4 o'clock. You sharp. Make sure the photographer gets the shots from my good side," Marcus said without turning around, "and remind them this is a 10-minute commitment, not a social visit." The ride to the hospital was mercifully short. Marcus spent it reviewing quarterly projections on his tablet, occasionally glancing up at the Chicago skyline. Success had built walls around him. Beautiful, expensive walls that kept the world at a comfortable distance. His penthouse apartment, his private jet, his collection of classic cars, they were all symbols of what he'd achieved through pure determination and calculated risk. Children's Memorial Hospital loomed ahead, its red brick facade softened by carefully maintained gardens, now dormant under the approaching winter. As the black Mercedes pulled up to the main entrance, Marcus could see a small gathering of hospital staff waiting near the doors, their breath visible in small clouds against the cold air. Dr. Patricia Henley, the hospital's chief administrator, greeted him with a warm smile that Marcus returned with practiced politeness. She was a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back into a neat bun. "Mr. Sterling, thank you so much for your generosity. Your donation will make an incredible difference in our NICU expansion project." Marcus nodded curtly. "Just doing my part for the community, Doctor. Shall we get started?" The photo session proceeded exactly as planned. Marcus held the ceremonial check for $500,000, smiled at the appropriate moments, and delivered his prepared statement about corporate responsibility and supporting local health care. It was a routine he'd perfected over the years, generous enough to maintain his company's public image, quick enough not to disrupt his schedule. As the photographer packed up his equipment, Dr. Henley began leading Marcus toward the exit. "Would you like a brief tour of the facilities? I'd love to show you exactly where your donation will be making its impact." "I appreciate the offer, but I have pressing business to attend to," Marcus replied, already reaching for his phone to call his driver. They were walking past the elevator bank when a woman in scrubs hurried toward them. Nurse Sarah Chen had been working at Children's Memorial for 8 years, and her dedication to her young patients was evident in every line of her tired but determined face. She was small in stature, but possessed the kind of quiet strength that came from years of caring for the most vulnerable. "Dr. Henley," Sarah called out, slightly out of breath, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but—" She paused, looking directly at Marcus with confusion evident in her dark eyes. "Sir, are you here to visit the twins in room 4? Marcus frowned. "I'm sorry, I think there's been some mistake." "I don't know anything about any twins." Sarah's confusion deepened. She looked from Marcus to Dr. Henley and back again. "But they've been asking for you for weeks now. Every day, Emma and Ethan ask when Uncle Marcus is coming to see them." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Uncle Marcus. He hadn't heard those words in over a decade. His hand instinctively moved to his chest, where beneath his expensive suit lay the only reminder of a life he'd tried so hard to forget. a small silver locket he'd never been able to bring himself to remove. "I think there's been some confusion," Dr. Henley said diplomatically. "Mr. Sterling is here for a donation ceremony, not a patient visit." But Sarah wasn't deterred. Years of advocating for her patients had taught her persistence. "The twins are in the NICU. They're 5 years old, which is unusual for our unit, but they have some ongoing respiratory issues. They've been here for 3 months now." She paused, studying Marcus's face carefully. "Emma keeps drawing pictures of a man in a suit, and Ethan, well, he talks about Uncle Marcus like he knows you personally." Marcus felt the familiar walls he'd built around his heart beginning to crack. The rational part of his mind told him this was impossible, a coincidence, a case of mistaken identity. But something deeper, something he'd buried beneath years of corporate success and emotional detachment, was stirring to life. "What are their last names?" he heard himself asking, his voice barely above a whisper. "Harrison," Sarah replied. "Emma and Ethan Harrison." The name hit him like a freight train. Harrison, his sister's married name. The sister he hadn't spoken to in 12 years. The sister who had chosen her husband over her family, who had walked away from everything they'd built together after their parents died. Marcus's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Probably his assistant wondering where he was, or a client needing immediate attention. For the first time in years, he ignored it completely. "Take me to room 4, he said quietly. Dr. Henley looked surprised. "Mr. Sterling, are you sure? We can arrange for a more formal visit another time if you'd prefer." "Now," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument, but also a vulnerability he hadn't shown in years. The walk to the NICU felt like it took hours, though it was only a few minutes through the hospital's warm, antiseptic corridors. Sarah led the way, occasionally glancing back at Marcus, with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She'd seen many families reunited in these halls, but something about this situation felt different, more fraught with unspoken history. The NICU was a world unto itself, a place where hope and heartbreak existed in delicate balance. The unit hummed with the constant sound of monitors, ventilators, and the quiet footsteps of dedicated staff. Through the glass walls of various rooms, Marcus could see tiny patients fighting battles that seemed impossibly large for such small bodies. Sarah stopped outside room 4 and turned to face Marcus. "They're both awake right now, which is good. Emma is the more talkative one, but Ethan, he's been asking about you specifically." She paused, her professional demeanor softening. "I don't know what your relationship is to these children, Mr. Sterling, but they need you. Whatever happened between you and their family, they need you now." Through the glass window, Marcus could see 2 small beds, each occupied by a child with dark hair and pale skin. Even from this distance, even after all these years, he could see the resemblance. The same stubborn chin that had belonged to his sister Rebecca, the same intelligent eyes that had run in their family for generations. Emma was sitting up in her bed, coloring in a book with intense concentration, even connected to various monitors, and with a nasal cannula providing supplemental oxygen. She had an air of determination about her that reminded Marcus painfully of Rebecca at that age. Ethan lay in the bed next to hers, quieter, but his eyes were alert and focused on something beyond the window. "How long have they been asking about me?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. "Since they arrived," Sarah replied. "At first we thought they were just confused, maybe thinking of someone else. But Emma draws pictures of a man in expensive suits, and Ethan, he describes you perfectly, down to your watch and the way you carry yourself." Marcus looked down at his Rolex, the same model he'd worn for the past 8 years. How could children he'd never met know such details about him? "Where are their parents?" he asked. though part of him already feared the answer. Sarah's expression grew somber. That's something you'll need to discuss with Dr. Henley. What I can tell you is that these children have been through more than any child should have to endure, and right now, they're looking for a family. Any family. Marcus placed his hand on the glass window, and as if sensing his presence, Emma looked up from her coloring book. Their eyes met through the glass, and Marcus saw something that made his breath catch. Recognition. Pure, immediate recognition, as if she'd been waiting for him her entire life. Emma's face lit up with a smile that was heartbreakingly familiar. She began waving enthusiastically, pointing at him and then turning to wake Ethan. Even through the glass, Marcus could see her lips forming the words, "Uncle Marcus." Ethan sat up slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. When he saw Marcus through the window, his reaction was different from his sister's, quieter, more reserved, but no less meaningful. He simply nodded, as if Marcus's presence confirmed something he'd always known to be true. "They know me," Marcus whispered, more to himself than to Sarah. "The question is," Sarah replied gently, "do you know them?" Before Marcus could answer, Emma had gotten out of her bed, trailing her IV line and monitors, and was pressing her small hands against the glass from the inside. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her smile was radiant. Marcus looked at this little girl, this stranger who knew him, this child who carried his sister's features and something indefinitely familiar in her expression, and felt something shift inside his chest. The walls he'd built around his heart, the careful distance he'd maintained from anything that might cause him pain, began to crumble. "I need to go in," he said. Sarah nodded and began the process of getting him properly sanitized and gowned. As she helped him with the procedure, she spoke quietly. "Mr. Sterling, I don't know what brings you here today or what your connection is to these children, but I want you to know they've been waiting for you. Whatever questions you have, whatever answers you're looking for, they're in that room." Marcus nodded, unable to trust his voice. As Sarah opened the door to room 4, he heard Emma's excited voice for the first time. Ethan, wake up all the way. Uncle Marcus is here. He finally came, just like Mommy said he would." And in that moment, Marcus Sterling, successful businessman, calculated risk-taker, man who had built an empire on emotional detachment, realized that his carefully constructed world was about to change forever. The twins' eyes followed his, every movement as he approached their beds, and Marcus found himself face to face with the two children, who somehow knew him better than he knew himself. Emma was practically bouncing in her bed despite her medical equipment, while Ethan watched him with the serious expression of a child who had learned too young that life could be uncertain. "Uncle Marcus," Emma said, her voice filled with wonder and joy, "you're exactly how Mommy described you. She said you'd come when we really needed you, and here you are." Marcus knelt down beside Emma's bed, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, the resemblance to Rebecca was even more pronounced. The same freckles across the bridge of her nose, the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. "Hello, Emma," he said softly. "I'm here now." As Marcus knelt beside Emma's bed, the weight of the moment settled over him like a heavy blanket. The little girl reached out with surprising strength and grasped his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his larger ones. The warmth of that simple contact sent an unexpected jolt through him. When was the last time anyone had touched him with such pure, uncomplicated affection? "You have the same eyes as Mommy," Emma said, studying his face with the intensity only children possess. "She always said you had sad eyes, but that they used to be happy when you were kids together." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Across the room, Ethan had been watching silently, but now he spoke for the first time since Marcus had entered. "She kept your picture," Ethan said quietly, his voice more mature than his 5 years should allow. "In her wallet. She'd show it to us sometimes and tell us stories about when you were little. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Rebecca had kept his picture. After 12 years of silence, after the terrible things they'd said to each other the last time they'd spoken, she had still carried his photo with her. Sarah appeared at the doorway, accompanied by Dr. Henley and another woman Marcus didn't recognize. An older woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor who was introduced as Mrs. Patricia Williams, the hospital's family liaison specialist. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Henley said softly, "perhaps we should step outside for a moment to discuss the children's situation." But Emma's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. "Don't go," she whispered. And for the first time since he'd entered the room, Marcus heard fear in her voice. "Everyone always says they'll be back, but sometimes they don't come back." Marcus looked into Emma's eyes and saw something that broke his heart. The premature wisdom of a child who had learned that the adults in her life could disappear without warning. He gently squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I promise. We're just going to talk right outside where you can see me through the window, okay?" Emma nodded reluctantly, and Ethan spoke up again. "You can trust him, Emma. Mommy said Uncle Marcus always keeps his promises, even when it's hard." The words were like a knife to Marcus's chest. Had Rebecca really said that about him? After everything that had happened between them in the hallway? Outside room 4, Dr. Henley's expression was grave. Mrs. Williams stepped forward to speak first. "Mr. Sterling, I understand this is a shock, but we need to discuss the children's circumstances. 3 months ago, Rebecca and Daniel Harrison were involved in a car accident during a winter storm in Wisconsin. They were traveling to a family reunion when their car slid off an icy road." Marcus felt the world tilt around him. "Are they Daniel, who died at the scene?" Mrs. Williams continued gently. "Rebecca was airlifted to a trauma center, but she never regained consciousness. She passed away 6 weeks later." The hallway seemed to spin around Marcus. His sister, his brilliant, stubborn, beautiful sister, was gone. The woman who had shared his childhood, who had been his best friend until pride and anger had driven them apart, was dead. And he hadn't even known. The children were in the car. Dr. Henley added softly, "They survived, but both sustained injuries. Emma had a punctured lung and several broken ribs. Ethan suffered a traumatic brain injury that initially left him unable to speak. They've both made remarkable progress, but they still require ongoing medical care." Marcus leaned against the wall, struggling to process everything he was hearing. Through the window, he could see Emma watching him anxiously, her small face pressed against the glass. "Why didn't anyone contact me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Mrs. Williams consulted her file. "According to the information we have, Rebecca had listed her mother-in-law, Daniel's mother, as the primary emergency contact. Mrs. Eleanor Harrison was caring for the children initially, but..." She paused, clearly, struggling with how to phrase what came next. "What happened?" Marcus demanded. "Mrs. Harrison is 78 years old and has been dealing with her own health issues since her son's death. Last month, she suffered a mild heart attack. Her doctor advised that the stress of caring for 2 young children with ongoing medical needs was beyond what she could handle safely. So where have they been living?" "They've been staying here at the hospital while we work to find appropriate placement," Dr. Henley explained. "We've been in contact with child services, and there are several good foster families we're considering, but they keep asking for you," Sarah interjected, having remained quiet until now. "Mr. Sterling, I've been working with children for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like this. These kids have been through unimaginable trauma, but they have this absolute faith that you're going to help them. Emma draws pictures of you every day. Ethan..." Before he started talking again, he wrote your name, over and over. It was literally the first thing he communicated after his injury. Marcus looked back through the window at the 2 children. Emma was showing Ethan something in her coloring book, probably one of the pictures she'd drawn of him. Ethan was nodding, seriously, occasionally glancing toward the window to make sure Marcus was still there. "I need to understand something," Marcus said slowly. "How do they know me so well? I haven't seen Rebecca in 12 years. These children weren't even born." When we last spoke, Mrs. Williams opened her file again. "From what we've been able to piece together from the children's statements and some personal effects recovered from the accident, Rebecca spoke about you frequently. She kept photographs, newspaper clippings about your business success, and articles from business magazines. It seems she followed your career very closely, but why didn't she ever reach out?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Pride, perhaps," Dr. Henley suggested gently. "From what the children have told us, Rebecca always talked about you with tremendous love and respect, but also with regret. She apparently told them many times that she had made a mistake, that she should have called you, but that she was afraid you wouldn't want to hear from her." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering their last conversation 12 years ago. The screaming match in his apartment after their parents' funeral, the things they'd said to each other in anger and grief. Rebecca had chosen to move to Wisconsin with Daniel, a man Marcus had viewed as beneath her, a simple mechanic when she could have had any successful professional she wanted. Marcus had accused her of throwing away her potential, of abandoning the family business they'd planned to build together. She had accused him of being a snob, of caring more about money and status than about her happiness. "You think you're so superior," she had shouted at him that night, "but you're just scared. Scared of being poor like we were as kids. Scared of letting anyone get close enough to hurt you. Well, congratulations, Marcus. You're about to get exactly what you want. A life where nobody can disappoint you because nobody will be brave enough to love you." Those had been the last words his sister had ever spoken to him, and now she was gone, and he would never have the chance to tell her that she had been right about everything. "Mr. Sterling?" Mrs. Williams's voice brought him back to the present. "There's something else you need to know. Before Rebecca died, she was conscious for a few brief moments. The last thing she said was your name. She asked the nurses to find Marcus Sterling in Chicago and tell him about the children. The words hit Marcus with the force of a physical blow. In her final moments, Rebecca had thought of him. Despite 12 years of silence, despite all the pride and anger between them, she had trusted him with the most precious things in her life, her children. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "That depends on several factors," Mrs. Williams replied. "The children have no other living relatives that we've been able to locate. Mrs. Harrison, their paternal grandmother, has already signed documents relinquishing any claim to guardianship due to her health situation. Right now, they're wards of the state, and unless a suitable family member comes forward, I want them." Marcus said suddenly, the words coming out before he'd even fully processed the thought. "I want to take them home." The three women exchanged glances. Dr. Henley spoke carefully. "Mr. Sterling, that's wonderful to hear, but there's a process. Background checks, home studies, court hearings. It could take months. Then we start the process today," Marcus said firmly. "What do I need to do?" "Are you sure about this?" Mrs. Williams asked gently. "Mr. Sterling, these children have been through significant trauma. They're going to need consistency, emotional support, and specialized medical care. It's not something to be undertaken lightly." Marcus looked through the window again. Emma was sitting on the edge of her bed now, her feet dangling, while Ethan had moved to the chair beside her. They were both facing the window, watching him with the kind of patient attention that suggested they were used to waiting for adults to make decisions about their lives. "I've spent the last 12 years building a successful business," Marcus said slowly. "I've accumulated more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I've got properties, investments, resources that most people can only dream of. But I've been alone, completely alone. and I thought that was what I wanted." He paused, watching as Emma waved at him through the glass. He waved back, and her entire face lit up with joy. "But those children in there, they're my family. They're all the family I have left in this world. And apparently, according to their mother, I'm all the family they have too. So yes, I'm sure." Sarah smiled for the first time since this conversation had begun. "They're going to be so happy. They've been waiting for you for so long." "There's one more thing," Dr. Henley said. "The children's medical needs. Emma's respiratory issues are manageable with proper care, but they'll require ongoing monitoring. Ethan's recovery from his brain injury has been remarkable, but he still sees a speech therapist twice a week and a neurologist monthly." "Are you prepared for that level of medical involvement? I'll hire the best doctors, the best therapists, whatever they need," Marcus replied without hesitation. "It's not just about money," Mrs. Williams interjected. "These children need emotional support, stability, someone who can be there for them consistently." Emma still has nightmares about the accident. Ethan went through a period where he was afraid to speak because he was worried that if he said the wrong thing, more bad things would happen. They're healing, but they're going to need patience and understanding. Marcus thought about his empty penthouse apartment, his sterile office, his carefully scheduled life where every minute was planned and every emotion was controlled. These children would change everything. They would bring chaos into his ordered world, force him to be vulnerable, require him to put someone else's needs before his own success. The thought terrified him. It also filled him with something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. "I understand," he said, "and I'm ready." Mrs. Williams nodded and made notes in her file. "I'll start the paperwork today. In the meantime, you're welcome to spend time with the children. Get to know them better. It will be good for them to have family here." As the group began to disperse, Sarah lingered behind. "Mr. Sterling, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. What changed your mind?" "You came here today for a donation ceremony, and now you're talking about adopting 2 children you've never met. That's a pretty big shift." Marcus considered the question seriously. "I think," he said slowly, "I've been living my life as if love were a limited resource, as if caring about someone meant I had less to give to my business, my success, my carefully constructed world. But looking at those children, seeing how they've held on to hope despite everything they've been through, I realize I've been the one who's been poor. They're rich in all the ways that actually matter." Sarah nodded approvingly. "They're going to change your life." "I'm counting on it," Marcus replied. When he returned to room 4, both children were waiting for him, their faces bright with anticipation. Emma immediately reached for his hand again, while Ethan scooted his chair closer. "Are you really going to stay?" Emma asked, her voice small and hopeful. "I'm going to do better than that," Marcus said, kneeling down so he was at their eye level. "I'm going to take you home with me if you'd like that. It might take a little while to arrange everything, but we're going to be a family." Emma's response was immediate. She threw her arms around his neck, IV line and all, and hugged him with surprising strength. Over her shoulder, Marcus saw Ethan smile for the first time since he'd entered the room, and it was like watching the sun come out. "After a long winter, Mommy said you would," Ethan said quietly. "She said when we really needed you, you'd come and you'd take care of us like Daddy would have." The words brought tears to Marcus's eyes, tears he hadn't shed in more years than he could count. "Your Mommy was right," he managed to say, "and I promise you both I'm going to do everything I can to be the kind of family you deserve." As the afternoon sun slanted through the hospital windows, Marcus Sterling sat in a plastic chair between 2 small hospital beds, listening to Emma chatter about her drawings and watching Ethan slowly open up about his favorite books. His phone buzzed constantly with missed calls and urgent messages from his office. The Henderson deal was probably falling apart. His afternoon meetings were definitely missed, and his assistant was likely in a panic. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Sterling didn't care about any of it. He had found something more valuable than any deal he could close, more important than any profit he could make. He had found his family, and they had found him. Outside, the Chicago winter was settling in, promising months of cold and snow. But inside room 4 of the Children's Memorial Hospital NICU, 3 people who had been alone in the world were learning what it meant to belong to each other. Emma fell asleep first, her small hand still clutching Marcus's, her breathing steady with the help of her oxygen supplement. Ethan stayed awake longer, asking Marcus quiet questions about where they would live, whether they could have a dog, whether Uncle Marcus knew how to make pancakes like Mommy used to. "I'll learn," Marcus promised. "I'll learn everything I need to know to take care of you both." As Ethan finally drifted off to sleep, Marcus remained in his chair, unwilling to break the connection by leaving. Sarah found him there hours later when her shift was ending. "You know," she said softly, "in 8 years of working here, I've seen a lot of families formed in unusual circumstances, but I've never seen children who were so certain that the right person would come for them. It's like they never doubted, not for a single day." Marcus looked at the sleeping children, his nephew and niece, though he'd never known they existed until today. Their mother raised them to believe in love, even when the people they loved weren't there. That's an incredible gift to give a child, and now they're going to give that gift to you, Sarah replied. "Get ready, Mr. Sterling. Your life is about to become beautifully complicated." As Marcus finally prepared to leave the hospital that evening, with promises to return first thing in the morning, Emma stirred in her sleep and murmured something he couldn't quite catch. He leaned closer and she whispered again, "Love you, Uncle Marcus." Standing in the hallway outside room 4, Marcus Sterling, millionaire businessman, corporate success story, man who had built walls around his heart to keep out anything that might hurt him, finally understood what his sister had been trying to tell him 12 years ago. He had been so afraid of being vulnerable that he had chosen to be alone. But love wasn't a weakness to be avoided. It was the only thing that gave life meaning. Tomorrow, he will begin the process of bringing Emma and Ethan home. He would learn to make pancakes, to help with homework, to comfort nightmares, and to be the kind of man who deserved the unconditional love these children were offering him. His phone buzzed one more time with an urgent message from his office. This time, Marcus didn't even look at it. He had more important things to do than close business deals. He had a family to build. As he walked through the hospital's main entrance into the cold Chicago night, Marcus Sterling was no longer the same man who had arrived that afternoon. He was no longer alone, no longer afraid of letting people matter to him. He was Uncle Marcus now, and that was the most important title he'd ever earned. The twins in room 4 had been asking for him, and he had finally come home. Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.